Okay, let's talk about this Week 1 47-10 massacre by the Saints over the Panthers. I don't need to talk about the game too much. The score was indicative of what happened. If it was possibly undersold how bad the Panthers were compared to the Saints. There is there are fantasy things to talk about from this after scouting the tape, but just from a game overview standpoint, it was as bad as it looked or worse in the box score and on the live watch. This is the final game that I broke down the scouting tape on for the week because I knew what I was going to see, and basically that's what I saw. Bryce Young, terrible again. We've made so much money betting against Bryce Young last year, and then again this year because there were mainstream football sites that were going in on that this is the year for Bryce. This is Dave Canales is going to turn it all around. They do not realize that Bryce Young is terrible and you can't fix him. He is not an NFL quarterback. He was worse here this week than probably any game that he played last year, or tied for the worst. I mean, there is zero growth happening because it's not possible. He doesn't have the arm. He doesn't have the body. He doesn't have the foot speed. It's a pipe dream that anybody thinks this guy is an NFL quarterback. I thank God that the mainstream is trying to buy into this because they said all the prop lines bad. They said all the Panthers win totals, and last year they were thinking they were going to win the division. We're just about to hit the tipping point now where the mainstream's going to give up. Normal folks that are serious about fantasy have sniffed this out a long time ago, but the seven-figure paid analysts are still hoping upon hope that he just needs an offensive coordinator, he just needed an offensive line, he just needed weapons. Bryce Young is the problem, and it is not going to get any better. So the Fantasy Football Metrics subscribers already knew all of this, so I'm preaching to the choir, but we've probably only got a couple more weeks for this to be to our advantage before the mainstream gives up. The one thing that you can do, that you can plan for in the short term to keep taking advantage of this is take the defenses against Carolina coming up, defense special teams, as you can pull it off as you might need it. The Chargers are as good a play as there's going to be this week. But next week they face the Raiders, and that Raiders defense is pretty good. The Raiders weren't that bad in Week 1. Their defense was pretty good, except for just a couple J.K. Dobbins runs that they missed a tackle on, let a hole go open on. Other than that, 90% of the game, they were squashing the Chargers. So that Raiders team will consume this Panthers team and spit it out in a hurry. The Chargers should be able to knock them out this week as well. This train is going to keep on rolling against Bryce Young, against the Panthers, against a bad Dave Canales head coached team, a delusional Dave Canales of thinking that this team was any good, trying to talk them up, trying to be positive with them. They're terrible. You can see it in the way that they're playing. They're moving around the field. They know they're dead before they even start. I mean, this game started out with a bomb touchdown to Shaheed. Then the first play that the Panthers had, Bryce Young threw a pick right to the Saints. I mean, that's how their season started. They knew they were done before the game even started, and then any enthusiasm they had was gone after the first series, or any hope that they had was painfully clear in the first series that this is the same Panthers team. Bryce Young is terrible, and they can't win these games. And they got righteously blown out. It was 30-3 at halftime. This team and organization and everything is a joke. And I'm not saying that to be all football guy and make fun of the Panthers, kick them while they're down. this is great. We're making money off of this. Last year, and we're making money off it again this year, but that well's about to run dry. They're about to throw him overboard. And the tipping point will be probably in a couple weeks. If Andy Dalton gets in, that puts a little stake in the ground. It doesn't mean that the Panthers are now good because Andy Dalton gets in, but Bryce Young is the thing we're taking advantage of. When they take Bryce Young away and put in a halfway competent quarterback, if that happens, then we'll have to monitor the situation and see how it looks. But this team definitely won't be as bad if Andy Dalton gets in. The only other note that I have fantasy-wise for the Panthers is, besides stay away from everything is terrible because of Bryce Young, all the receivers are useless for fantasy, and the running backs aren't going to be able to go anywhere because there's bad run blocking, bad schematics, and their defenses are going to be able to play the run because they don't care if Bryce Young drops back to pass. That's to their advantage. So the one thing they can do is try to hone in on the run, cut it off, and dare Bryce Young to beat him, which he won't. But I saw some quotes from the coach and some things in fantasy articles about, Xavier Legette looked so good. Dave Canales was like, man, he really showed up. He didn't look like anything to me. They're trying to send him, he's like DK Metcalf, and he's only going to be an outside receiver. You can't make him an inside receiver, but the Panthers are trying to make him an inside receiver, and he looks so awkward and nervous going to the inside because he's just an outside big guy with speed, and is going to be good on the outside as he develops. But sending him to the inside, you could see it in the preseason, saw it in this game. He's very hesitant. He's very uncomfortable doing that. Maybe down the line he'll get better at it, but it just doesn't seem to be his thing. He led the team in targets. He led the team in catches. Some people are going, this is a sleeper situation. No. As long as Bryce Young is there, nothing's a sleeper situation. But what I see in Legette, I don't see a sleeper situation developing at all. All these weapons looked slow to develop. Legette, Sanders, the tight end, everything looked like it was stuck in mud. Completely unimpressed with the Panthers, as I expected, as we saw in the preseason, as we saw last year, as we predicted before last year even begun. So that gravy train's only going to be rolling for a little bit longer. But I'm still amazed that there are people that are still thinking Bryce Young has got potential, but it's the same people who think Caleb Williams is going to be able to turn it around, and that was a great prospect, and they're the ones that bought into all the Marvin Harrison stuff. We were so right about these top-ranked guys. If I was as wrong about prospects as the entirety of football analysis, I'd be out of business a long time ago. It's inexplicable how these top prospects can be so obviously bad. You can see it in their college tape, or they're not as good as what everybody's saying, and yet 99.9% of analysts, and therefore the fans, just go along with it like they see something because they've seen some highlights. It is remarkable. But don't get me started about Bryce Young. Gets me all worked up. I'm happy for all of this. We couldn't be making money as bettors. We couldn't be doing well in fantasy, avoiding this whole situation, if we didn't know these things in advance. So fortunately, we've been way ahead of the curve on that, way ahead of the curve on Caleb Williams, way ahead of the curve on Marvin Harrison, and they are all hitting big against the entire tide of fantasy analysis in the other direction, which is just the way that I like it. So that's it for the Panthers. Nothing but complaining about the Panthers. There is serious fantasy things to talk about with the Saints. And I'm just going to go in kind of the order that I have them down in my notes. And recognize this game got out of hand so fast. The Saints didn't have to get creative on offense. They pulled a lot of their guys for the fourth quarter. So some of these numbers that you see, if you're disappointed in any particular player, we don't really know what the reality is because they didn't play a real NFL team. and this was over so fast. So like Chris Olave having 2 catches for 11 yards on 2 targets, oh, that's buy low all day long. That's not because there's been a shift in the offense. That's not because he's out of favor. It's because they didn't need him because everything else was working. They got the bomb to Rashid Shaheed right off the bat, and therefore that took a bunch of pass game yardage away all on one play. Then they were just able to run it with Kamara and Williams and Hill. So there didn't need to be this grand passing game. And Olave just wasn't needed to throw all of the targets to, like Carr will when we get into more competitive games. But this, make no mistake about it, new offensive coordinator definitely is going to want to run the ball every chance that he gets. He said it all preseason that that's what they're going to do, that they're going to run it behind Alvin Kamara. And that's what they did. Now, when an opponent punches them back, like the Dallas Cowboys will, especially at Dallas this week, then we'll see what modifications they're willing to make and who they're going to lean on. So Kamara's definitely the lead running back. Taysom Hill is the second running back. I know Jamal Williams is technically the second running back, but when Taysom Hill's going to be weaved in to the game plan in so many different ways, but now he's legitimately lining up at tailback like he was doing in the preseason. The second play of the game, first play of the game was Kamara at tailback. The second play of the game was Taysom Hill at tailback. By my count, Taysom Hill didn't play the fourth quarter or late into the third quarter because they just pulled. I mean, the guy does everything, and they were winning by 30 plus. There's no reason to have Taysom Hill out there doing anything. Give the guy a break. He's like 34 years old. He plays like he's 28, but he does everything: special teams and fullback and tight end and quarterback and tailback. So they gave him a break. Then they gave Kamara a break. That allowed Jamal Williams to have 11 carries. There's no plan for Jamal Williams to have 11 carries unless they're winning games by 30 plus points in the second, to begin the second half of the game. So this is going to be Kamara run dominated, with Taysom Hill getting probably, I'd say, 5 to 8 carries a game. He only got 5 here for 35 yards, 7 yards a carry. Every one of his runs seemed to be chopping for 5 and 6 yards a pop. But I think he'll get more action when they're playing in a real game. And he's going to be more of the goal line guy when they get into a real game. Kamara got a short punch-in touchdown in this game, but Taysom Hill wasn't on the field. The game was getting out of hand. So, let Kamara get his touchdown. When it comes to crunch time, we'll see Taysom Hill in on those goal line situations, stealing touchdowns, whether he's a wildcat quarterback or a running back. He took 5, by my count, 6 plays as a true tailback, single set back tailback. One of those he went out for a pass. He actually went out for a bomb from running back out of the backfield and just sprinted deep to the end zone, had a shot at a 30-yard touchdown, got it thrown to him, and it was a contested jump up and catch it in the back of the end zone, and he couldn't come down with it. So that's a nice option that they threw in there, is him at tailback, but then him running a pass pattern out of it and going deep. The other times that he was back at tailback, mostly he got the ball. Once or twice it was a play action fake to him. He got in to play wildcat quarterback one time and took a run off of that. He was in at tight end a few times. He was in at fullback a handful of times as a blocker, really good blocker. He was doing a little bit of everything, but he only played about 2.5 quarters of this game, and much of the second half and leading up to the halftime, they were pulling their regular players because this was almost like a scrimmage against this is like the varsity scrimmaging a JV team. So there's going to be bigger, brighter days ahead for Taysom Hill, classified as a tight end. Probably this week against Dallas, you'll see him get 5 to 10 carries. You'll see him probably get a pass target or two. You'll probably see him at wildcat quarterback 3 or 4 or 5 times. There's real potential for Taysom to be a tight end one because there's such tight end despair out there that if he only gets 20 yards but somehow gets a goal line touchdown, which he might get one every game, that's going to make you a tight end one these days. So bigger and better days ahead for Taysom Hill as a tight end who's really a tailback / jack of all trades, really a fullback tailback.
Front porch doesn't support that.
So the next note, speaking of tight ends, so Taysom Hill, sorry, I got thrown off by my Alexa talking to me about turning the lights off on the porch. Speaking of tight ends from the Saints, so Taysom Hill's classified as a tight end, but he doesn't really play tight end. The two tight ends for this team are Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson got a touchdown, and I know Derek Carr loves Juwan Johnson in the end zone, in the red zone. Seeing Taysom Hill not take as many snaps at tight end and seeing Juwan Johnson get a touchdown, when I watched it live Sunday, I was like, oh, there's an opportunity for Juwan Johnson to maybe be some type of low-level tight end one hope because he has touchdown hope. He's a touchdown producer. And Derek Carr's got a good connection with him. But after rewatching this game today and taking note of it and looking at the details, Juwan Johnson only played about 30% of the snaps. Foster Moreau played 70+% of the snaps, and Foster Moreau looked good. Foster Moreau is the tight end to have from this team. I was taking it lightly after Sunday, but now that I've had a chance to break down the tape and look at the detail, I'm kind of interested in Foster Moreau all of a sudden as a tight end by what I saw in this game. The Saints want to be a heavy run team, so it only makes sense to have Foster Moreau be the starting tight end because he's a really good blocker. Juwan Johnson's more of a receiving tight end. So Moreau's going to be on the field a lot, and in these days, with the despair at tight end for fantasy, a guy that's on the field 70+% of the time and is going to get some targets, there's some viability there. He had 4 catches for 43 yards. He caught a really nice touchdown pass, a kind of a desperate throw from Carr, threw it up for grabs, and Moreau came down with it. But outside of that play, the other targets, Moreau looked really good. I'll kind of go on record. I'm going to hedge a little bit because I so am not used to Moreau being up in this area because he's been more of just a blocker, but he's a pretty talented tight end overall. But this was the best I've seen him look as a receiving tight end, and they kind of used him as such. It may be a bit of a head fake because this game got out of hand, so they used him some more. But I don't know that Foster Moreau might not be a tight end one candidate again because the tight end action is so down and suppressed this year. So I'm kind of surprised by it. I was ready to go, Juwan Johnson's the sneaky one here. No, Foster Moreau is a very viable guy to watch. I'm not saying I'm going to jam him in as my tight end, starting tight end for fantasy this week, but for those in deeper leagues where there's not a lot of talent out there, Moreau might actually be something at tight end. For everybody who's scrambling after Colby Parkinson, who I'm a fan of, and we've been on for a couple of years waiting for a moment like this, so the Rams are using him more, but the Rams are never going to make Parkinson like a number one target option. That's always going to be Cooper Kupp and Puka and the other wide receivers, but within that, Parkinson's a viable option. He's a really good, smooth receiver, and we saw that on Sunday night when he finally got a chance to be more showcased as a receiver with the Rams instead of being buried by Pete Carroll and Seattle. Foster Moreau, with a new offensive coordinator here, kind of had that same vibe, only I think more. I think Foster Moreau looked better here as a receiver than what Colby Parkinson did. Now, he does have to fight with Juwan Johnson for some tight end targets, but we're not talking. I'm not saying Foster Moreau's going to make a break to be like the number one tight end in fantasy. I'm just saying he could make a break to possibly being a fringe tight end one in a sea of despair at tight end. I mean, what are you gonna put all your hopes in Pat Freiermuth? Dalton Kincaid doesn't get used by Buffalo properly. George Kittle's looking extra slow. Mark Andrews looks very slow right now, and Isaiah Likely's about to take his lunch money. There's a lot of despair at tight end, and then you look and go, Foster Moreau is in a spot kind of like a Jake Ferguson where they're the heavy starting tight end, playing the most snaps, good run blocker, so they're going to be on the field on a team that wants to run it. There's going to be targets that come with it, and he looked sleek and quick, and I was really impressed with Foster Moreau here. Last thing to talk about, then we'll close it up. Rashid Shaheed caught a bomb touchdown on the first series, as he does. Usually when he does that, you don't hear from him for the rest of the game. For whatever reason, they see how great he is, and then they just decide we don't want to see any more of that. That we filled our quota is one big play, and that's pretty much what happened here. He only had 2 other catches for 14 yards, so what started out amazing just kind of fizzled out and was pretty good. But within that, Rashid Shaheed, there was another, I think on the next series or two series later, another bomb was coming in, and it was right on the money, and it was going to be another 50-plus yard, 40-plus yard touchdown, but the defender made a great play on it and knocked it away, or Shaheed would have gone nuts, and Shaheed would have been the wide receiver of the week in waivers, and everybody would have gone crazy. He looked really good here, but he always looks good, so it's a cautionary but half exciting tale of the guy's great, but the Saints never seem to use him right, but he's so great that you never know when he's going to have his moment. It seems like every other week or two he gets his long touchdown and gives you a decent fantasy week, even though he doesn't get plied with a ton of targets. In this game, he got more targets than Olave, but again, that's because the game flow of this got all the way off. He almost returned a kick for a touchdown. I mean, Shaheed's just a great player that's always kind of a fringe waiver wire guy, understandably so because of the way the Saints use him, but maybe it's going to be better this year. But if Moreau's coming around, they want to be a run game team, and Taysom Hill's doing a bunch of interesting things, then I don't know if Shaheed can have enough consistency. But if he ever does start to get consistent looks, the guy's great. The guy's one of the great underutilized weapons in the NFL. Could be one of the great fantasy weapons if he could get the targets, but usually after his big game like this, almost guaranteed next week you won't hear a peep from him. Then he'll hit the waiver wires, nobody will trust him, then he'll get another long touchdown, everybody will be back after him, then he'll have a letdown, then everybody will cut him. That's the pain of dealing with the Rashid Shaheed. It's painful because he just doesn't get that consistency. It's not his fault, it's Derek Carr and the Saints' fault. But when you have an opponent like Carolina, everybody looks good and everything looks great. So, yes, Shaheed looked good. Moreau looked good. Taysom Hill was doing his thing, but it all started to get pulled back on the stars. But then guys like Moreau and Shaheed, it was just like a scrimmage game for them. So it may be that they just looked good because they were playing a bad opponent. But I'm definitely keeping my eye. I've always loved Shaheed and have him on several teams in fantasy, but usually on the bench. I might try to start him this week, but I know when I do, that's when he's going to burn me. So I'll be in consternation about it, probably up until Sunday kick. But I am keeping my eye on Foster Moreau in deep leagues where there's nobody really out there. I'm starting to pick him up, where I'm starting to lose faith in my other tight ends, or if I had Jake Ferguson go down with his MCL sprain, if you had Njoku go out, and you're just looking over these names and going, oh, good Lord, who am I going to try? You might want to try Foster Moreau. Juwan Johnson's not out of the equation, especially non-PPR, but Foster Moreau may be worth looking at. All right, that's it. That is the last game I had to process for this week. All the other game scouting reports are on Fantasy Football Metrics website. I am getting ready to, now that I've wrapped this up, I'm going to start digging deeper into the prop bets to bet for the week. And I'm seeing a running theme opportunity. Last week it was the running back receiving yard overs that there were a lot of low, weak, bad lines on that we exposed greatly. Very good week for props last week with those low-level receiving yardage plays on the running backs. Terrible week of me picking games against the spread or money line win upsets, but I only play those lightly. I'm a prop player. I'm the king of props, and it was a good week, which means this week the line setters are on to this now, and I see them already either not listing the running back props, receiving props, or they've got them bumped up. But there's another position, there's another situation that they're underselling, which I think they did this time last season as well, and you kind of have to jump on them early. I'm still going through it all. I'll report out on the site later tonight, or maybe by the time this video posts, I'll have already put them out, because this might be a late Saturday night or late Friday night release or early Saturday morning release. I'll have those props out sometime Friday night, and then a refresh of those, a relook to see. They'll dump more options out on Saturday midday, and then by Saturday night they'll have pretty much showed us all of their original cards on all the props, lines, over, under. So now that I'm done with all this week 1 processing, it's time to go win some money in props. So that is it for this game report. I am out of here.